Guys, it's Steve. Welcome back to the Bourbon Basement. Today, it's the Sweet 16 of the March Madness Bourbon Bracket. And I'm going to have some fun with you guys today. That's all we're doing here. Anyway, let's start with the East and our number one seed, Duke. So in the round of 32, you had Duke versus TCU, which is Old Forester Presidents, represented by Duke, and TCU was represented by Baker's 13. I had, Duke moved on, so Old Forester Presidents moved on, President's Choice. You had St. John's versus Kansas, which was Blood Oath 11 versus E.H. Taylor Barrel Proof. St. John's and Blood Oath 11 moved on. So now in the Sweet 16, you have Duke, Old Forester Presidents, and St. John's Blood Oath 11. And I've got Duke in that matchup. Now, guys, if you didn't watch any of the other videos and this is the first video you're moving in on, what we're doing here is we're picking you'll have to go back to the first video and watch to find out how we matched our bourbons with the teams. But we're letting these games play out. I'm just picking for fun. But when we get to the final four, guys, we're going to blind taste those final fours and tell you who's going to win this whole thing. But we're only going to do that at the final four. Anyway, so let's move on. In the round of 32, you had Louisville, represented by Knob Creek 12, and Michigan State, represented by Old Forester Birthday Bourbon. Had the Knob Creek 12 winning that one. But anyway, Michigan State did win, so Old Forester Birthday Bourbon moved on. In round of 32, you had UCLA Green River Single Barrel versus UConn Woodford number one. Woodford and UConn moved on. So now you've got in the Sweet 16, you've got Michigan State, Old Forester Birthday Bourbon versus UConn and Woodford Double Double O. I'm a Woodford Double Double O fan. I love that wood, oaky, smoky flavor. It just hits right most of the time. Uh, and this is Old Forester birthday 25. If this was 24, I may have picked Old Forester to move on. But right now, I've got Woodford and UConn moving on. So I got Woodford Double Double Oak moving on. So that puts me in the Elite Eight. I'm going to have Duke with Old Forester Presidents versus UConn Woodford Double Double Oak. And I'm going to move Old Forester Presidents on to the Final Four. So we'll see how that works out. But I got Duke and Old Forester Presidents moving on to the Final Four. And you know what? I was supposed to move these bottles out here. So Duke versus St. John's. Duke moved on. Sorry, guys. Louisville. I'm sorry. Michigan State versus UConn. UConn moves on. And then Duke versus UConn. Duke moves on to the Final Four. So if we get to the Final Four, if Duke does make it, no Forster Presidents is going to be in there. This will be a fresh crack of the old Forster Presidents bottle I just got this year. So that'll be exciting for me and maybe for you guys. I don't know. But that's the end of that one. So now we'll move on to the West. And in the West, you start with Arizona and the Pappy 15. Uh, So now, like I said before, I've told y'all in both videos so far, this is the only Pappy I have here in the Bourbon Basement. My brother does have the Pappy 15, so it'll be here if Arizona moves on to the Final Four, and I will be tasting the Pappy 15. Uh, when we opened that bottle this year, Pappy 15 was probably the best bourbon that I had put in my mouth to this point. Uh, in my bourbon journey. So it's going to be hard to beat that Arizona Pappy 15. Now blind tastings, guys, it does a lot of stuff. So this bottle's just representing Pappy family right now. They are going to be facing Arkansas in the Weller 107. So Arkansas did beat High Point, and Arizona did beat Utah State to move on. So now you got these two playing in the Sweet 16, and I'm moving my Arizona and the Pappy on because like I said, this is fantastic bourbon as well, but it is really hard to beat that Pappy 15. If you haven't tried a Pappy yet, uh, especially the Pappy 15 to this date, uh, I know most of the time you got to win a lottery or just have a lot of money in your bank account to get a bottle, but it is worth it. I don't know that I could uh, drink it all the time if it was, it may be my favorite bourbon ever, but I couldn't drink it all the time. So, but anyway, Pappy's moving on. Uh, then you come down here and you got so Texas, big Texas, the play-in game, represented by 2XO. They've won and won and won and won and won, and they've got to the round of the Sweet 16. So, congratulations on Texas and the 2XO Gym of Kentucky. They're going to be facing Purdue Knob Creek 21, who actually beat Miami, which was Maker's Mark Cellar Age. Either one of those bottles, I think, would have been great to open. Uh, but so I got 2XO Gym of Kentucky, also an excellent pour. And I just did last Friday, we just did a live on that show. So you can go back and watch the 2XO Gym of Kentucky, tasting a little bit of the history about that. And the thing that gets me here is 2XO in Texas. I've tasted Knob Creek 21. I've never tasted. I haven't tasted the Knob Creek 21. Um, so with that being said, though, I love the Knob Creek 12. Thought it was fantastic, and it may be as good as the 2XO Gem of Kentucky. Then the Knob Creek 18, I've got an empty bottle of that over on my shelves where we put that away because it was fantastic. It was better than the 12, so I think it was better than the 2XO Gem of Kentucky. So that must mean that the 21 is better. So I'm going with Knob Creek and Purdue. Moving on. Uh, So that moves Knob Creek and Purdue on over Texas. Sorry, Texas. But that puts me at Purdue and Knob Creek 12 or 21 versus Pappy 15 in Arizona. And like I said, guys, the Pappy 15 may be the best bourbon that I've tried in my bourbon journey. So of course I got Arizona moving on and Pappy 15. So they're moving on. Knob Creek 21's moving out. All right. So that takes us to those two to the final four. Let's move over to the Midwest bracket. Now this is where my team, the Kentucky Wildcats, uh, played a little basketball. Anyway, we won't talk too much about that. But anyway, so you had Michigan and Stag versus St. Louis with Hirsch's Cash Strength. Michigan and Stag won. So Stag moved on, and they're going to face Alabama Rabbit Hole Florida, who beat Texas Tech in the Four Roses small batch. Now, with that one there, Stag, y'all probably heard me tell my story many times about my experience, my first experience with Stag, and it's a good one. So that one moves on. This also is a good bourbon. I did a show on that in Port St. Joe. So if you haven't watched that live show, you can go back and watch that. But I got Stag moving on and Rabbit Hole going home. Uh, Down here on the bottom half of that, you had Tennessee with Never Say Die bourbon, beat Virginia with the Evan Williams 12 year. One of my biggest bourbon upsets. I'm not saying Tennessee over Virginia was an upset. I don't know because I don't even follow the basketball that much unless it's Kentucky. But uh, Evan Williams 12 years, fantastic, fantastic bourbon. But Tennessee won, so Never Say Die moves on. And then you had the Cats there, represented by Rabbit Hole Higo, against Iowa Michter's 10. Michter's 10 moved on, and Iowa moved on. Oh, here they are, just so you can look at those bottles. So Never Say Die, Texas, Iowa, and I've got Iowa Michter's 10 moving on that one. So I got Tennessee going home, Never Say Die Bourbon going home. But now let's take it to the final four. So you got Iowa Michter's 10 against Stag. And guys, right before we did this, I was going to pick Stag right off the bat. Um, but I knew Michter's 10 was good. I've tried it. We haven't done a show, but we've done a tasting on it too. And so I had to go blind them just a second ago and taste them. And I ended up picking Michter's 10 in the blind. So I've got Michigan going home, and I got Michter's 10 and Iowa moving on to the Final Four. And that has nothing to do with them trouncing Kentucky. They may have made all their baskets, against that. So anyway, nothing to do with that. Just to do with the blind bourbon taste I just had. I couldn't remember how good that stag was and how good that Michter's 10 was. I just compared them and I picked the Michter's 10 over. All right, so let's move on to the final bracket here, which probably the biggest upset in the basketball tournament so far, maybe. You had Florida and Russell's 13 playing Iowa and the Wild Turkey Rare Breed. Well, Iowa and Wild Turkey Rare Breed moved on. And then you had Vandy, represented by Old Ezra 7, playing Nebraska and Bookers. And Nebraska and Bookers moved on. So now I have a Wild Turkey Rare Breed playing Nebraska and Bookers. And I moved on Bookers. I do like most of the Bookers that they put out. It is very good bourbon. So I moved on Bookers and I sent Iowa home. Then you come down to the bottom part of that bracket. You got VCU Green River playing Illinois and Blanton Gold. And of course, Illinois and Blanton's Gold won. And then you come down here and you had Texas A&M, which was the Michter's Toasted, playing Houston Angels Envy Cast Strength, and Houston Angels Envy Cast Strength won. Well, when I try these side by side, I like the Blanton's Gold, so I'm moving Illinois out. Illinois and Blanton's Gold out, and I'm sending Houston and Angels Envy Cast Strength home, which is probably an unpopular basketball choice, but that's my bourbon choice. So now I've got Nebraska and Bookers playing Illinois and Blanton Gold, sorry. And I went with Illinois and Blanton's Gold. That was another one, though, that could have been either way. I think it just depends on what mood you're in. So that takes me to the Final Four, guys. We'll see how those games play out this weekend. And then I'll do the Final Four episode before those games start. And we'll have a winner. Uh, and it won't be the bottles that I've chosen unless those bottles win. But just think, if we did have a Final Four, uh-oh, if we did have a Final Four like that, this is what it would be. It would be, let's see, if my Final Four was true, right, it would be Pappy versus, let's see, who's the bottom one? The Midwest right here. It'd be Pappy versus Michter's 10. And then it would be Old Forester President's Choice versus Blanton's Gold. And then those winners, which if I was choosing those winners without tasting, I would choose this. So you'd have Pappy 15 versus Old Forester President's Choice to see who's going to take home the crown. But anyway, it may be that way. It may not be that way, but we'll see. Hope you enjoyed the show. I hope you had fun with all this bourbon. I have fun putting this stuff together. It does take a lot of work and a lot of time, but I did enjoy it. And hope you all watch this video. Give it a like, follow, tell your friends. Remember, our live streams are every Friday at 6 p.m. Sometimes Ryan's on there, sometimes he's not. And but anyway, guys, why drink alone when you can drink with us? We'll see you next time.